Okay, so in chapter 16, there's a bunch of different topics related to the launching a new product. And I'm going to cover some of the most important ones, which I've highlighted here. Yeah, but I'll briefly touch upon actually all 8 of these, but I'll really spend more time on sort of the most important ones. So permanence is the idea that when launching a new product, you want to consider, do we introduce this new product for the long term, or is the plan that we'll introduce this product for maybe just a seasonal type of product, or perhaps you say we'll introduce it for 6 months and see if we meet our goals, and if we do, then we'll keep it as a permanent. So there's a certain sort of balance between having permanent products, and then I have the example of candy cane ice cream of being something that is intentionally a temporary product. Type of demand sought. This would be thinking about what sort of demand are you looking to do as far as creating new demand or pulling demand from other customers or from other brands. So primary demand is where you're building demand for new to the world products and establishing a whole new brand. So you're essentially starting from scratch. Replacement demand is where you're having customers migrate, or customer migration. You're having them migrate from an older product to a newer product. Or car companies, what they'll do is they'll have customers migrate from a product they might have in their 20s to a vehicle that they might have in their 30s or their 40s. So sports car to a minivan kind of being the cliche example of that. And then selective demand. This is when you're entering into an established market. The goal with selective demand is that you're trying to actually encourage trial and purchase, and you're trying to get customers to go away from competitors. So 3 different approaches. Obviously, you want as many customers as you can get, but obviously, depending on the type of product and the industry, you could have different demand sought. Scope of market entry. So what are we actually doing? How are you going to enter the market? Are you going to just put the product everywhere right away, or you're going to roll it out slowly? So it's not meant to be test marketing. You are actually launching the product, and you are actually trying to sell the product, but you might be doing it slowly. You might be doing it sort of moderately, or you might really be rapidly sort of trying to get it everywhere as quickly as possible. So as an example here, Dunkin' Donuts. This is a prime example of rolling out products slowly. Dunkin' Donuts, of course, is based here in Massachusetts. And when you look at a map of the number of Dunkin' Donuts locations, there's a really, really high concentration in the Northeast. You do see, gradually moving over, and you see some markets away from the Northeast, such as Atlanta and Chicago. You see some hotspots. Nonetheless, this is really slow for a really established brand. You see very little in the Northwest and really in the Mountain West areas because they just don't see as much opportunities there, largely because you have other competitors, obviously Starbucks, Caribou Coffee out in that area as well. And Dunkin', they're happy to move pretty slowly, actually. These other topics that I mentioned, I'll just quickly give some definitions on them. Product line replacement. This is when you're going from one version of a product to another. So sticking with a car example, Toyota is going to have a RAV4 come out every year. How do they do this? Do they go from 24 to 25? Just one is dropped on the same day that the new one is introduced. Do they have a little overlap? Do they do it seasonally? In other words, maybe they tie them up, with the holiday seasons when they know customers are shopping. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but product line replacement, essentially just trying to get that timing right between dropping an old product and introducing a new one. Are you going to be aggressive upon introducing the new product, or a bit more cautious? What type of competitive advantage are you looking for? Do you want to have a different product? Do you want to be a price leader, or you want a little bit of both? How do you relate to the competitors? Are you aiming to avoid competitors, or are you actually aiming to take them on directly, where you're actually, the Samsung and Apple approach, where they're trying to take customers from each other? And then the image. Are you looking to create a whole new image with this new product, sort of tweak an existing image, or use some sort of already existing image with a new product? And usually the more established a brand is, the more they're probably just going to tweak or use an existing image. If they do need to do something totally different, then they'll usually introduce a new brand. And that's why, again, using my car example, Toyota and Lexus, whether separate brands, even though same parent company, because they don't want to alter the image too much of those two brands. So they just create a whole new image. A couple other topics that are related to launch. There's this idea called crossing the chasm. The idea behind this is when we're looking at the product life cycle, again, based on historical averages, the majority of customers are not going to adopt a product right away. The interesting thing, though, is you can get this sort of sense of almost, okay, we're getting there, and then things plateau before you reach your ideal target market, the majority, that is. This is called the chasm. And so in a lot of cases, there can be these issues of crossing the chasm where you might have this exciting, high-tech product, let's say, but it's difficult to get to that point where you're reaching the early majority. So I've used smartphones as an example a lot in class, and I'll just stick with it here. Earlier smartphones did not cross the chasm. The early adopters, the innovators were really excited about them, but they just never reached the majority. Then, mid 2000s, finally that chasm got crossed, and of course, smartphones became adopted by the majority, and they're everywhere today. Trademarks and registration. So the topics I'll talk about in the next few slides are really, if you take global marketing, they cover this a lot, but I'll quickly go over them because they're certainly relevant to developing a new product. A trademark is really where you have some sort of word or symbol or logo that really ties into what the brand is. So the trademark are the legal aspects of this. So I have the GE script here. That's their legal trademark. No one else can use it. The brand is really more sort of conceptual, right? So that can change a little bit over time. It can change a lot over time, but hopefully you're not doing any drastic brand changes. Another thing that's sort of interesting is, what do we do? Like I said, going global marketing, what do we do when we're trying to go into a new market and we want to stick to a brand names that we think will work? There's this great long history, this kind of funny long history of brands that really failed because their names didn't translate. Crapsy Fruit, Happy End, Zit. These are, all real names of products that because of translation issues, they clearly weren't going to work in English markets. So, and it's worked the other way around too. Companies are a lot more mature about this, especially when it comes to consumer goods like yogurt and toilet paper, beverages, those sorts of things. Companies are a lot more, they have a better understanding of global markets now, and they tend to be able to avoid some of these mistakes that you would have seen 30 years ago. Now, brands also need to have an approach when they're thinking about branding of how important is our parent company. And so this can help determine if you use an umbrella branding strategy or individual branding strategy. An umbrella branding strategy is where a corporate name goes on everything. So Kellogg's does this. They put their brand name on everything. Umbrella branding strategy. Kellogg's is a strong name. They want that to go on their products. Procter & Gamble, however, does a different approach. They let the individual brands stick out. They don't really highlight the Procter & Gamble name, even though that is the parent company. So interestingly, many of you might not be super familiar with what Procter & Gamble is or what they make, but you certainly know their products like Tide, Bold, Mr. Clean. And why do they do this? They, in a lot of cases, they feel that these brand names can stick out more than, their somewhat generic sounding corporate name. The other thing that can happen is the Clorox case, where Clorox is so closely tied with cleaning products that it's really hard for them to go away from that. So Casey Masterpiece barbecue sauce or Hidden Valley salad dressing. You don't really want to have a brand name that people think of cleaning products when you're trying to sell salad dressing or barbecue sauce. So Clorox instead says, well, we'll use the Clorox name for cleaning products. And then for other products, we'll let the brand name stick out. So different variations on the umbrella and individual branding strategy. And then finally, when companies are going global with their products, how much do they change? they can or cannot change their brand name, or they can and cannot change their position. So like in a positioning map, right? So Gillette, razor company, they don't really change anything. People need razors. Gillette, they let that stick out. Lay's potato chips, they do change the name in the UK. They're called Walkers, right? They've found through market testing that name sort of sticks a little bit better. But as you can see in the example there, they essentially look like Lay's, so they have more or less the same position. Gucci. Gucci is seen in high end in the US, but not so much in Italy. And actually, clothing companies, this ends up happening with a lot. Levi's, it kind of works the other way around, right? Kind of more an everyday brand in the US, but higher end in other countries. And then McCafe. McDonald's is actually the largest coffee brand in Australia. Different name, different position. Really kind of interesting to think of McDonald's as being this, essentially the Dunkin' Donuts of Australia, or the Starbucks of Australia. But they found an opportunity there, and they decided to adapt position and brand name. Now, I want to quickly highlight the case you just did. And obviously, you can look at your individual grades for some of the comments that I have, but just some things that could be helpful here. A lot of you mentioned, from this case, what can be learned. Product tests should be done in more than one market, and you really need to have an understanding of what customer expectations are. Product innovation charter, as always, we want to talk about the tech strengths and the marketing strengths. So Pepsi's strong brand, efficient production, the background they're building off of coffee trends, and the goals and guidelines they're looking to, they want to have really embrace a Starbucks partnership there. Now, why did the Kona fail? Well, they didn't do enough product testing. I think just about everyone talked about that. And they went right to market testing without even doing a great job of market testing, frankly. So, they just kind of pushed forward, just thinking they had this great partnership with Starbucks. They kind of overlooked the fact that the product wasn't really what anyone wanted. Now, should you be worried about Pepsi One? Well, maybe. They should be worried about skipping some of these tests. However, Pepsi One, it's diet cola. It's less of a jump from prior products. So you could certainly make an argument here to say they don't need to be quite as worried, even though they are skipping steps again. They don't need to be quite as worried about this because they know that there is a market for low-calorie sodas. Okay, so great. So that's chapter 16. Again, I would say go back to the textbook when you get a chance to kind of go through some of these topics I touched upon. And again, with the case, you'll be able to see your comments through Blackboard or through Canvas either. Hopefully this will at least cover enough that you'll be able to get a head start as you get ready for the exam. Okay, thanks.